Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to go over how to install Linux Mint and set up gaming on it. But first, it's important to acknowledge that not all games work on Linux. So here we have protondb.com, which is a database of user feedback that tells you how well a specific game will run. If we click Explore here, we can see Arc runs it natively, so it does not need the Proton compatibility layer developed by Valve. What Proton does is it translates in real time Windows only calls to calls that Linux can understand to get the game running. So native means it doesn't need that at all. It just runs on Linux without Proton. Gold means it runs perfectly after tweaks, although personally, most of my Steam library is ranked or marked as gold, and I've never had to tweak any gold games myself, but you might have to depending on your hardware. And then there are also bronze and silver. So each tier down requires more tinkering and it runs worse. So silver is after gold, meaning it might require even more tinkering to get working, but it works well once it's done. Bronze right here runs but often crashes or has issues preventing from playing comfortably. I've played a few bronze games. Yeah, it's true. They don't. For me at least, they don't run all that well. And then there's also platinum, which means it runs perfectly out of the box and does use the Proton compatibility layer. We also have Bort, which means it either won't start at all or it is just unplayable as it is. Next, we have our anti-cheat related games, and this is the main reason games will not run on Linux. So here we have areweanticheatyet.com. And this website is similar to ProtonDB, but they mark if a game's anti-cheat supports Linux, runs on Linux, or is broken or denied, so it won't run. So supported, here like Halo Master Chief Collection means the developers went out of their way to make sure the anti-cheat will run on Linux. Denied means they actively said they will not add Linux support. So hopefully that changes sometime because Linux is a growing platform and they're going to be running out of, they're going to start missing out on players if they don't enable anti-cheat for Linux. We also have running, which means the developers did not specifically set the anti-cheat to run on Linux, but it currently works. And then broken, which means it's supposed to work, but it doesn't actually work at the moment. So you can also see the anti-cheats being used as well as some additional notes. Some of them say requires Proton GE or Proton Experimental. We'll get into what Proton GE is towards the end of the video. So like I said at the start of the video, we are going to install Linux Mint today. So this is the Linux Mint website, linuxmint.com. I'll have all of these linked in the description. So you can go ahead and click download. Yeah, they have their own install instructions here, but so they have the different editions, which only are differed, as far as I understand it, by the desktop environment being used. So the desktop environment on Linux is the program that lets you drag windows around, maximize them, minimize them. It gives you the graphical interface to interact with your computer. Cinnamon Edition, as it says, the most popular version of Linux Mint is the Cinnamon Edition. Cinnamon is primarily developed for and by Linux Mint. It is slick, beautiful, and offers new features. We have XFCE, which is more lightweight, so if you have an older computer, you might want that. Then Mate is, I believe, even lighter than that. I'm not entirely sure, but depending on your hardware, you can download a different edition with a different desktop environment. But for the vast majority of cases, Cinnamon Edition will work well even on older computers. So that's what we are going to download today. You click download and then it brings you to a mirror list. So optimally, you download it from a mirror that is closest located to you geographically. So I live in the US. I'm not actually sure which one of these is closest, so I'm just going to pick one and stick with it. So I'm going to pick Sonic, I guess, and save. What that's going to do is going to download the ISO file. The ISO file is what you boot to off the USB drive once we flash it onto the USB drive, and it contains the image that hosts the operating system. After that is finished, you can then go ahead onto the Balena Etcher website, etcher.balena.io, then / download Etcher. So I'm going to click Etcher. In my case, I am using an existing Linux install, as I use Linux for everything. So I'm going to go ahead and download this one right here, but you're going to want to match the one that matches your operating system. So if you're currently using Windows, do the Windows installer. For Mac, use the Mac installer, etc. After you have those installed, go ahead and go to your downloads folder, which mine is appearing to be empty. 1 second here. Oh, I see what I did. So for some reason, it downloaded mine into my pictures folder. So you can see the thumbnail for the video. Anyway, I'm going to extract the zip file for Balena Etcher, and I'm going to launch the program. This will probably look different for Windows. I believe you just run the exe installer and it does this for you, but on Linux you have to do it a little bit more hands-on and manually. So now you can go ahead and plug in a USB drive. I find around 4 gigabytes to be sufficient for Linux Mint. Once you have it plugged in, we can now flash the ISO image onto the USB drive, but be aware doing this will delete all existing data on the flash drive. So if you have anything important, be sure to back it up or install it onto a separate drive before continuing. So if we click flash from file, we can then select the Linux Mint Cinnamon 64-bit.iso file. We can open it, select the target, which is our flash drive here. We can select it, and then once you click flash, that is when all of the data on it is actually erased. So this is a good time to really make sure you don't have any data you don't want to lose. So let's go ahead and click flash. This is just a warning because the drive is a large drive. Yes, I'm sure it will probably prompt you for a password on, I think, every operating system for your admin password. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now it's flashing, and I will wait until this is finished. Okay, it is finished. So now what you do is you're going to take that USB flash drive you installed it onto, and you are going to plug it into the computer you want to install Linux Mint to, and you're going to boot to it from the BIOS. I can't really help you with getting to the BIOS because it differs from manufacturer and sometimes even from motherboard model to motherboard model. So depending on your motherboard, the key will be different, but since I have a Gigabyte motherboard, the key is the delete key. Then I can go ahead into the boot priority and set the USB drive to be the first option, so it won't try to boot into any other existing bootable media that the computer already has. So if you don't know the key to enter your BIOS, you can look it up at your manufacturer's website, but there are also probably tutorials depending on your motherboard model. But generally, it's either delete, F2, or F10 is what I've seen so far. Okay, so once you plug it in and boot to it, I'm using a virtual machine in this case, so you don't have to install it on an actual computer, but all these steps will still apply to you. Once you see this screen, that means you have successfully booted into the USB drive, which you have installed Linux Mint onto. So you have a few options here. The first is the Start Linux Mint. They also have compatibility mode, which I believe is for older hardware. You also have OEM install, which you don't need to worry about. It's for computer manufacturers. So we're going to go ahead and start Linux Mint. It takes a second sometimes. And then you're going to, when it's done loading, see a live environment of Linux Mint. Now, in this environment, it's not actually installed, it's just running off the USB drive. And here you can test it out, see if you like it or not. It's not actually installed yet, like I said earlier. So you can test it out, see if you like it. Anything you do here will not save or ruin the system at all once it's actually installed. This is just here for testing purposes, such as your hardware, or if you want to just mess around with a few things, you can without breaking the system. Let's go ahead and fix my resolution because it's a little small right now. Let's do 1080p. Keep changes. So now, after you've probably messed around in here for a little bit, if you decide you want to install it, click Install Linux Mint, or double click it just like on Windows. This will then launch the installer, which is actually very easy, and I'm willing to argue is easier than installing Windows. So first, your prompt is your language. They have a lot of languages in here, so chances are they will have your language in it. Mine is English, so I'm going to continue. Then you get your keyboard layout, which they also have a lot of. So English US, they also have different options for it. So, for example, if you want the US International keyboard, they have that in here. But the default is fine for me, so I'm going to click Continue. Now, install multimedia codecs. It says they're required to play some video formats and to properly render some websites. You do not need to install them, although I heavily recommend you do so you don't run into issues in the future. It just makes it much easier. Then we can click Continue. Now, here's where we select where we want to install it to. So it says this computer currently has no detected operating systems. What would you like to do? So we can either erase the entire disk and install Linux Mint so it installs. So it's self-partitioning like that, or we can do something else to manually partition it. If you have another operating system installed, you'll see a third option called Install Alongside, which will prompt you to shrink the partition of your existing operating system so you can install Linux Mint aside it in a dual boot system. But once you have it partitioned the way you want, or you just click Erase the entire disk, install Linux Mint, you can click Install Now, and it shows you the partitions being made. So we have an ESP partition and an ext4 partition. You don't have to worry about those right now, but make sure it looks partitioned correctly if you are manually partitioning it, and then click Continue. So now here you have to select your time zone, which has mine correct, so I'm going to click Continue. Your name, I'm going to say Linux user. So this is your username for your local account on the computer. This is the name you'll use to log in. Your computer's name is what your computer will appear as on your network. So make sure you name it something memorable in case you like to moderate your network and kick unauthorized devices off. So I'm just going to call it a Linux PC in this case. Like username, Linux user. Oh, I got that backwards. So your name, you can just type whatever in. It doesn't have to be your real name, but that's used to auto-generate your username, which is what you use to log in. So choose a password. I'm just going to do 1234 for the sake of the video. Make it simple. It will warn you about a short password. You don't have to do anything about it. You can set it to log in automatically or require your password to log in. Additionally, you can also encrypt your home folder. Now on Linux, the home folder is the folder in which your user resides. So that means all of your personal files will be encrypted, but the system files will not if you enable this. So if you want that extra security, enable it by clicking the check mark. Next, we can just wait here for the install to finish, which I will cut to when it's done. Okay, now this is finished. Here you can either stay in the live environment to continue testing, or you can restart now, which is what I'm going to do. It'll then log you out, and it will ask you to remove the installation media, which is the USB flash drive, which you have installed Linux Mint onto. So once you remove that, you can press enter and restart. I'm in a virtual machine, so I have to relaunch it myself. And here we are. You can see my Linux user. I'm going to type in the very secure password of 1234. And then here, welcome to Linux Mint. It's a start guide. So here I'm actually going to use the desktop colors to change this to the dark theme, just because I like that more. Here you can also set up your system settings, your firewall, your updates, which I'm actually going to do right now. So here, welcome to the update manager. You can click OK, and you can click apply the update. It will prompt you for your password. And unlike Windows, for updating your system, you do not have to restart afterwards. I'm just going to click yes to the local mirror so it installs. Okay. Apparently not. Okay, never mind. Ignore that. Then we can click install updates. To type in your password. And it will update your system. So I will be back when this finishes. Okay, the updates have completed, which again, you do not have to restart to apply them. But it is good practice to restart, as very specific updates, specifically kernel updates, can't fully be applied until you restart. So if you see or know of the Linux kernel being updated, it is actually recommended you restart, but it's not necessary. Next, I just realized too that I need to reset the display resolution because it does not save settings from the live environment. Which is actually why in the live environment you can mess around without breaking stuff. But here, fix the resolution. Okay, now on to drivers. So drivers on Linux work not like insanely differently than Windows, but they are different, and that most of them are built in to the kernel itself. What this means for you is, as a user, you do not have to install very many drivers, if any at all. So for graphics drivers here, if you have an AMD or Intel graphics card, whether it be integrated graphics or a discrete graphics card, you do not need to worry about drivers as they already are built into the kernel. However, for NVIDIA, you need to install them yourselves as they aren't built into the kernel and are proprietary, so they can't be distributed through the kernel. So to install them on Linux Mint, you can go to Driver Manager, launch it. It will then search for any additional drivers you may need. It doesn't specifically relate to graphics drivers only, although it does have them, and you can use this to install your graphics drivers without needing to go to the NVIDIA website. Now on to installing Steam. So on Linux Mint, we have a program called Software Manager. The first launch, it takes a while to load. So what this software manager does, it's a graphical interface for installing Linux packages, because on Linux, programs are distributed as packages with all of the dependencies they need being shipped with it. So you don't need to go to the website And what this also does, it also increases security, as these stores, more or less, are heavily moderated and they constantly check for malware being uploaded. And I personally, after using Linux for a year now, have never seen any malware in any sort of software manager on any Linux operating system. So here you can go ahead and browse software. Everything in here will be free because that's the Linux philosophy. They just like to distribute free software. So we can actually go ahead at the top, search Steam. You don't even need to press enter. Right here we have the Steam client, Steam devices, which is device support for Steam related hardware, I believe. Yes, we also have Steam Link if you want to stream your games, but we're going to go ahead with the Steam client. We can click install. So additional software being installed. So what these are, the additional software being installed, are the dependencies that Steam requires to launch and work properly. So we're going to click continue, type in our user password, and then authenticate. And now it will automatically install Steam for us without any other further work needed. Okay, it finished installing, so we can now click launch to launch Steam, or the Steam installer more specifically, as this just installs the installer for Steam so it can update independently of your operating system. Because on Linux, the packages are updated with your system as the developers add them to the update repositories, with the exception of Flatpak, as those are completely agnostic to your operating system, so they update independently and run in user space. But in this case, Steam is a system package, so to kind of like bypass the update thing, they have it install an installer, which is then installs Steam, which is what we're going to do right now. And I'll be back after it's finished installing Steam. Okay, the installation has finished, so I'm just going to go ahead and close the software manager and search for Steam and launch it, which it might take a second because I'm in a virtual machine. Virtual machines aren't the fastest. And then here you can log in like normal. You can also pin it to your panel by right-clicking, clicking pin to panel. It does the same thing as on Windows, so when you close out of it, the icon will stay and you can launch it from there. Okay, so I've gone ahead and logged into Steam. So we can go to our settings here and compatibility. By default, Proton is enabled now, but you can also change to the beta version if you want, or whatever other version you desire from here. So this applies as the default Proton version for all games, but I recommend keeping it on Proton Experimental, as it's stable release, but it also comes with features that the old, like the version releases, like 9.0-4, for example, might not have, that some games may rely on. So I'd recommend sticking with Proton Experimental. And you can go to your library and install games like normal. They should run without any work, again, depending on the ranking on ProtonDB, which you can reference for any game on Steam. Now you may be wondering about your non-Steam games. For that, we have software called the Heroic Launcher, which is used for your Epic games, your GOG games, and your Amazon Prime games. So they're all in one launcher. I personally use it myself for playing PC Building Simulator 2, and it works practically perfectly, with one exception, specifically on PC Building Simulator 2, which I'll get to after this. It has to do with the Proton compatibility layer, but I'll get there when we get there. So I have launched Heroic here. It will ask you for It's an analytics. I don't like to do that, so I can just click disable. But you can click login and log into your stores. Now, if you have games from other platforms such as EA or Ubisoft, there's a program called Lutris, which marks itself as a game preservation platform. And what this does, it allows you to add games from a huge variety of different vendors in. It also allows you to just run the game if you just have the exe file. So we just have the exe file saved somewhere on a separate drive or something like that. You can add that file to Lutris and it will install the dependencies to run that exe file. And it works really well from what I have tried. It also gives you the ability to configure specific things about the game, like the resolution and whatnot, without needing to go inside the game. So it's quite useful if you have games from several different vendors. So here's Lutris. So right here we have the Epic Games Store, the EA Store, Ubisoft, Steam. We also have the runners like Flatpak, Linux native, Steam once again, and Wine, which is a Windows compatibility, not designed for games. It's designed for general purpose, but sometimes some games do rely on that. So you can try out Heroic or Lutris for your non-Steam games. Now, after scrolling for a while, you might have noticed that some people on ProtonDB or whatever are saying they use Proton GE. What Proton GE is, it's a modified version of Proton made by someone that goes by Glorious Eggroll, which is what the GE stands for. And what it does is it enables enhanced compatibility with even more games. So, for example, when I was installing PC Building Simulator 2 for the first time on Linux, some of the textures would not load and some of the in-game videos would not load. So all I had to do was install Proton GE, which fixed all of those problems running the game with that version. So to install it, we can go back to our software manager. We can search Proton, and there's two tools for this mainly, Proton Plus and Proton UpQT. I prefer Proton UpQT personally. I haven't. It's just because I'm familiar with it. I haven't tried Proton Plus, but it might be better. You'll have to let me know in the comments. But we can wait for this to install. And what this does is a tool to allow you to install custom versions of Proton, such as Proton GE. Low disk space, I'm going to ignore that. Because the virtual machine only has 25 gigabytes of storage. And I'm using up all of that. So we can click that. So installation, by default, it should... So you can select which program you want to install it to. So it should default to Steam in most cases, but you can select which program or launcher you want to do it to. So here we have Steam, we have Lutris, we have Heroic as well. And I want to install this to Steam, so I'm going to click Add Version. Then Compatibility Tool, you can select which one, in this case Proton GE. Then do the latest version available. Then I'm going to click Install. And then it will then proceed to install Proton GE into Steam. Now if we launch Steam here and go to the compatibility settings, once it properly finishes installing, you should see the option for Proton GE as the compatibility tool in here. So I'll wait for this to finish. It might take a while. Okay, it's finished installing. What you need to do is you need to restart Steam fully, so to make sure it's not running at all. You have to relaunch it, and then we'll go back into compatibility. Steam, settings, compatibility. And now it didn't properly install because I'm so low in storage. But after restarting, you'll see the Proton GE version. You can click that. It'll then prompt you to restart. So I'm just going to switch to Proton Hotfix to show you the restarting. Restart required. Then you'll restart. And then that will be the default for your games from now on until you change it in the future. So there you go. That's how you run your games on Linux, Mint specifically. Hopefully, this will ease you into using Linux. And you may have noticed we did not touch the terminal at all. That's because the terminal, although useful if you want to do things really fast and you understand what you're doing, it's no longer necessary, especially on beginner friendly Linux operating systems such as Linux Mint. So that will conclude this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and tell me which what sort of tutorial you want to see next.